I'd like to welcome everyone and remind us all that the board takes seriously its responsibility to be a model of civility and to safeguard the public ability to directly address the board by providing the appropriate board meetings decorum in accordance with resolution number 10-1378, which is posted at every board meeting. Thank you. Now I'd like a roll call. Julia, please.
Yes, thank you, President Scylla. Borstein?
Yes, ma'am.
Gaffney?
Here.
Kelly?
Here.
Meggs?
Yes, here.
Scylla?
Here.
All present, thank you.
Thank you. Now I'd like to lead you in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And with that, we will adjourn to the closed session. So I will see those of you who are joining us on that. Thanks.
This conference will now be recorded.
Reviewed a claim listed on the agenda in closed session and rejected the claim. That was agenda item number 5, it turns out. Agenda item number 6, approval of the agenda. Does anyone have anything they'd like to move around on the agenda? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Pam, thank you. Julia, roll call vote, please.
Yes, thank you. Borstein?
Yes.
Gaffney?
Yes.
Kelly?
Yes.
Meggs?
Yes.
Scylla?
Yes,
Unanimous, thank you.
thank you. Item number 7, open time for public to raise items not on the agenda or for future agenda. Do we have any public who like to raise any items? Seeing none, we'll move on to agenda item number 8, committees report out. Finance Committee. Tom, would you like to tell us about the Finance Committee?
Okay, I'll start. Mary and I met yesterday as the Finance Committee, and the first thing we did was review the mid-year financials. And as Mary pointed out, basically the revenues are greater than budgeted and expenses are less than budgeted. So our mid-year financials look quite good. And December is the major infusion of our revenues, and we collected almost $19 million after our dry spell since March and April. We spent some time reviewing a request for a retroactive lateral replacement grant, and we had a few questions for staff, and they came back and answered them for us after the meeting. And we also reviewed agenda items 13 and 14 for the contract provisions. For one is for project management, and the other is for construction management of the Butterfield Arroyo Kenrick gravity sewer improvements, which is phase 3 of that Butterfield Road project that's been going on for years. And then we heard a discussion from Siobhan, Public Accountants Paul Pan, and reviewed the Public Financing Authority audit, which we recommend approval, and which we did approve at the Public Finance Authority meeting. Anything else to add, Mary?
No, I don't think so. We reviewed a lot of things that we'll talk about on tonight's agenda, but ask detailed questions. CMSA, Michael or Doug, who would like
Doug,
to?
you want to start? But you have to unmute.
Okay. We had a review of our our technology vulnerability. Basically, there was an issue where somebody sent a requestment in for payment, which was done by ACH. Turns out the person that got the money wasn't the organization that was entitled to the money. And so that was plugged. And by the way, our insurance covered almost every bit of it, so it was not as bad as it could have been. But that put forward a request from the CMSA board to review all of our security proceedings. So we had a great presentation by the security team there. They talked about anti-phishing, about all of the ways that people get into systems. They talked about how they're locked their systems down from each other, how the public Wi-Fi that, for example, BYOD, bring your own device. The board members bring their own device, but they're on the public Wi-Fi and can't access anything inside the network. So we talked about all of that, and I think it was very good. We looked at a new Fog Ordinance and new words to put in the Fog Ordinance for clarity and for the public's understanding. Also on the Fog Ordinance, it says if there's a certain, sort of like our Lateral Ordinance, if you do change hands of a restaurant or you do a certain amount of upgrades, you automatically have to put a new fog interceptor. And that's not always necessary, because if it's a coffee shop, there's no grease. And so we changed that to it may. Other than that, and some terminology changes, there wasn't much to that. We did award a construction contract for the secondary clarifier. That was $476,000. We had split that. We thought that bid was too high back in April, I think it was. Was it April or March? And we denied it. We put it back up, and it came out virtually the same. But the first time we got one bid, and this time we got 4 bids. So it is what it is. Unfortunately, we didn't save any money on that, but we did make an attempt to do that. And we also approved putting out to bid. We don't have any bids. We putting out to bid a replacement of the administrative building's roof. That roof is at the end of its life. There are a lot of buckets around on rainy days. Fortunately, we haven't had a lot of buckets this year. Unfortunately, we haven't had a lot of buckets this year because there's no rain. And also, I say finally, we're planning for the Board of Commissioners strategic plan workshops for the next 5 years strategic plan. And we are all, as board members, being interviewed prior to that. And then we'll have 2 workshops. Oh, heck, let me get those dates, because I think that might be important to the board. And I do have it. I wrote them down. But not on that page.
I have them right.
Thursday, April 8th, and Thursday, May 6th. And both of those start at 5 p.m. by Zoom. Of course, anybody can attend and are welcome to do so. Michael?
Yeah, the bid that happened last March, there was only one respondent to it, and it wasn't the same exact bid, but it was, you know, the result this time, even though there were more bids, respondents this time, it wasn't exactly the same. It was repackaged a little bit, so it's a little bit apples and apples, but this time it was about $30,000 difference. It was very interesting what our security. It was a good presentation that Tuomas did for us, and it's interesting because with everything that's been going on lately, with the thing in Florida, we examined that, and where somebody got in through a not a go to my PC, but a log me in kind of session, because the guy saw a mouse moving, the arrow moving on the screen, and adding lye to the water system, and they caught it in time, and there was no damage done. But we make sure, and we audit all the time, and we have companies which are auditing for us and companies which are auditing for them on top of that. You know, where we could possibly be vulnerable is the SCADA systems, but those are completely outside of the internet. So my understanding is we really shouldn't have any vulnerabilities there. An interesting thing, in one of our projects, we talked about it a while back, our digesters are giant stomachs. And we have a problem, which is if we make, you know, if the digester eats too much chocolate, metaphorically speaking, it gets an upset stomach. And it's very bad for us if you get an upset stomach in a digester, because we have 2 of them. And if it gets out of balance, we actually have to shut the digester down, drain it, and start up again from scratch, which can take months to get it going. Now that we have a cogeneration system, and even a bigger one coming online, you don't want to have your digesters get out of whack. And it turns out that nobody had ever really done a study on what percentages of your waste that's in there digesting can be. And we generally been running ours at about 40% of volatile solids in the past. And we wondered, how much can we increase our volatile solids before we get an upset stomach? Because the more volatile solids we have, the higher our energy output can be, and the more energy we can send to Marin Clean Energy, and that's terrific for everybody. So last year we bought these two little bitty digesters, and anybody ever wants to go over and take a look, I'm sure we can arrange for a little go look-see, because it's pretty interesting and took a long time for us to figure out how to get them going, and using the same exact effluent that we're getting into our digesters. And then we start raising them up. We want to raise them up until such time as they get that upset stomach. And then we do the figuring out with the bacteria, can we sustain at that level? At any rate, we're back online again now for actually we finished the first piece of that project, and we'll embark on phase 2. And we were running it at 60% volatile solids loading from food waste and fog. So that's a really good thing to know, because that's 50% higher than we've been running in the past. And we've been running such that we have about 99% fuel where we're not importing electricity from PG&E, a little bit of natural gas, which we have to get from them. But the rest of it we've been producing on our own, and that's with our old 750 kilowatt cogeneration engine, which is about 1 year from now going to be retired, and we've got a new 1 megawatt engine going in that's 30% more efficient than the old one. So we're going to be looking for much more organic fuel. And it's interesting because we picked a good year to sort of wind down that old test, because organic fuel with restaurant waste is a little bit difficult to come by in the past year because of the COVID. So we've been fighting two things, but it looks really, really good going off into the future. So I'm excited about that.
If I can just clarify, Michael mentioned the old cogen. It's really a new reconditioned old cogen, and it won't really be going offline. It'll be there as a backup. So that thing will last for many, many years. We spent some good money on it. It's absolutely brand new, reconditioned, used 750 kilowatt cogenerator.
But it is old technology and running at 30% less efficiency than the new one. So although it'll be there when we have to do maintenance on the new one, it's going to pasture, but will still be there if called to action. So that's it.
That's great. Thank you guys so much. I'm so pleased that we're in charge of CMSA. North Bay Watershed, Pam?
Yes. To start with, we had a couple of speakers from the Bay Regional Monitoring Program, and they talked about clean water, their clean water program, and they are affiliated through the San Francisco Estuary Institute. Melissa Foley, PhD, she's the program director, and Z Tan was the environmental scientist. So it was an overview of how they monitor the Bay, and it's interesting. They talked about, they've been doing science gathering for the last 5 years, and they kind of break off at certain periods and then report out. So what they're basically looking for in these monitoring gatherings, or however tests, they're looking for, hold on, I gotta find my notes. Dioxins, PCBs, trace metals, pesticides, microplastics, and I'm sure there's more. And it's really fascinating because Since childhood, my father fished out of the bay and we ate everything. And I don't think you can do that anymore. It's kind of sad. So they do reporting on the hydrology of the water, the sediment, the water quality, and they also do stream temperature. And I imagine that's mostly, maybe it's geared at coho salmon. So what else did they talk about?
Yeah,
So there's a
lot cleaner now than it was when you were a kid. I guarantee you.
what?
It's a lot cleaner now than it was when you were a kid.
Well, I mean, that's what my father did for fun, was to fish in the bay. It's like, anyway.
Fishing for lead.
Yeah, that's probably what's wrong with my brain. So the other thing that they found is some new research on tires, because a lot of people, that's their thing. They just get rid of tires. They don't want to take them to the dump. It's really expensive. And there's a new leaching, a preservative that's coming off the tires that they're now finding in the water. And I'm sure you've heard some of the issues around microplastics as well. And then last, they also do municipal wastewater testing. And there's a couple of questions they ask, like what contaminants do they find in municipal wastewater and at which treatment plants, and how much of a reduction is needed when they find the various things that I named, and then what is the effect of the reductions or modifications on bay water quality as they monitor. So it was really interesting. And Andy Rogers, the new chair, is awesome. And we've got some new members, one from American Canyon, and our kitty is around 200,000. We had to postpone the conference because of COVID. And that's my report.
Great, thank you. Does anybody have any questions for anybody on the committee reports? I'm sorry, I didn't take the opportunity before. I hope Steve will weigh in at some point on whether the bay is cleaner now or some years ago, but we'll move along for now. That's not on the agenda. Oh, well, verbal report by general manager, item number 9. Steve.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, President Silla. And thanks, board members, for all the committee reports. It was very interesting. So for today's general manager verbal report, I do have a number of things to report on. I've got 6 things. Some will be real fast, some will take a little more time. The first will be Larkspur Landing property. The second will be 1111 Anderson. The third will be Regional Water Board cease and desist order and IAMP. Fourth will be Cal OES grant for backup power. The fifth will be the Casa Conference that we attended, the winter conference, and a couple of highlights that I would like to pass along because we've talked about maybe having a brief report on that. And then the sixth and final thing, last but not least, is the Easement Initiative and where we are on that business plan priority. So 6 things, right? I'll get right on it. So Larkspur Landing property, as you know, the informational presentations that we've held at the end of September, in December and January. And really the next step we talked about in January was to work on an appraisal of the property to determine fair market value. And we're targeting late March to meet about that issue. Just more education, no decisions have been made on Larkspur Landing property. We're still educating ourselves on the processes. The next thing that should happen, I do have news. The US EPA will provide comments back to us on our draft completion report by February 28th. And at that point, we will receive their comments, make changes to the report, and submit a final completion report for their final approval. And I don't know how soon they'll turn it around, but we're hoping that we're talking about a month, that maybe by the end of March, early April, we may actually have final sign off, which we believe then triggers, and we seek the board's direction on this, but we think it's logical to be more public about an announcement that the property has been cleaned up and have a strategy to do that. Now, along those lines, staff is going to propose to the board in March, at the March 17th meeting, a communications plan for Larkspur Landing property, so that the board can consider that and look into, oh, excuse me, we have a guest. Could you mute your microphone, please?
I can try, hang on. Okay.
Thank you. And so I just want to let the board know, we plan to have in the next agenda a communications plan so that we have a chance to lay out a little more what happens after the EPA clearance. Some ideas include distributing a press release to local media, looking at a community survey, and further on having a virtual community meeting to allow folks to learn of the survey results. And so this all is a period of public engagement, and to update our frequently asked questions on the web page, and making sure that there's an opportunity for the ratepayers to really have meaningful input into the decisions that you're going to be considering, and you haven't made any yet. So that's a plan for next month. There was an offer made on the property last week, but as we've learned through the educational process, there's a Surplus Land Act process we must follow as a public agency, and so we really aren't entertaining offers on the property at this time. But that's why Century Urban has been hired as a consultant to help us manage that, and so there is interest out there. I'll mention that the board was interested in when we retained Riley Hurd as land use counsel in October. We issued a $5,000 retainer, and I wanted to report out on the expenses that we've incurred. To date, we have been billed $18,280, and there's still a $1,300 retainer for Riley Hurd and Ragianti Freitas. To remind the board what services that we received since October, Riley Hurd assisted with 2 of 3 informational presentations. He had ongoing communications with the city of Larkspur that were favorable and useful, and he worked on the letter to the city on the general plan that was submitted on time and received by the city by February 4th. And so that's it for my update on Larkspur Landing property. I'm not sure if we wanted to have any questions. Sure. Yeah.
I just want to suggest we talked about when we get the final sign off from Environmental Protection Agency. That's really the beginning of this whole thing, and that's when we'll publicize. We'll talk to the IJ, specifically. Who's the guy that wrote that article? Adrian Rodriguez.
Adrian, yes.
And kind of make this whole thing more in the public's face so that they can get more involved and come to meetings via Zoom, or if and when we have meetings in person. Is that right?
Certainly, interested in maybe fleshing those ideas out more in the March meeting when we consider a communications plan, because I'm fairly certain we won't have final EPA sign off by March 17th. And so we can definitely, we encourage the board to discuss those ideas and direct staff.
Well, I'd also encourage you and perhaps Gabriella to design some sort of a sign for the property itself, because there's a lot of traffic that goes by it. So if you put up a big sign that says something along the lines of, because some people won't know what that property is. This is, RVSD property. It's, may become available sometime in the future. For interest, go to rvsd.org. And again, just more transparency, more highlight, more public awareness.
Yeah, thank you.
Pam?
We did make a sign for the cleanup project. We could reuse that sign structure.
There you go. you said a communication plan. Will that be a special meeting or a regular meeting? And then my next question after that is survey. I think you said survey, and I'm curious because our last survey did not have any questions about Larkspur Landing. Thank you.
Yes, it would be, our proposal is the next regular board meeting on March 17th. And the survey, I think that's, we'll put more meat on the skeleton, at that time within the draft communication plan. I just want to give you an update that we were contemplating that and getting public input on the disposition of the Larkspur Landing property.
I guess my request is that the board can look at the survey before it's sent out. That's my ask, but I don't know about others.
So noted. Okay, moving on to number 2 of 6, or President Silla, you want me?
I can't believe you're only on number 2, but okay.
Well, that one was a longer one. The other ones won't be as long. So number 2, just briefly on 1111 Anderson, the construction drawings are underway, and staff is meeting with the consultant on this Friday to go over some questions they have for us as we refine that aspect of the process and moving ahead. We did provide we've been assembling legal comments on the draft lease that the tenant Comcast provided us. And so that process is well underway, and I believe we'll be submitting our response to the tenant very shortly in the next few work days, is my understanding. So that's moving along. And we have access to the building, and that's why we're making this good progress on the construction drawings and other aspects. But good, yeah, I've got Felicia nodding. That's a good update. Number 3, the Regional Water Board. I think Board Member Borstein has waving his hand.
Very quick question. At this point, when does Comcast stop paying the full nut? Do we have a date on that?
There's no date established yet. Although it's relative to when the lease is signed, right? Okay. So when the lease that we've just provided very substantive input on that process, or we're going to transmit in the next few work days. Once we come to agreement on that and execute the lease, it is a certain time period after that. And Felicia, can you remind me what that is?
Yes, exactly. It's 15 days. 15 days after the execution of the fully executed lease.
And at that point, it's more or less cut in half, right? Right now it's the triple net lease, and it's close to cut in half as far as what is drafted this time.
So even if we signed it at this point, they still would have been paying us for 2 full years.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
As Elva said, plus tax.
April be 2 years.
Yeah, April 2nd. That's correct. Okay, so keep moving. Number 3, the Regional Water Board cease and desist order. Just a quick reminder, each year we do an annual report to the Regional Water Board on tracking our progress on both capital improvement commitments under the Infrastructure Asset Management Plan that was established in 2013, as well as operation and maintenance commitments, addressing pipe defects and the manholes and so forth. And so our tally is really wrapping up. We only have a handful of projects. They're all spoken for in the coming months. And the final date of compliance in this 2013 order is June 30th, 2021. So that's the last date of compliance in this cease and desist order. And we're on track to meeting the commitments. There were some deviations from the capital commitments that were justified based on risk and condition assessment information. We communicated that in July, proposed to update the IAMP, and the Regional Water Board accepted that proposal. And so that's coming due at the end of March, and we're on track to finalizing the IMP update, working with HDR and West Yoast. They're going to give us a straw proposal capital improvement program based on risk, and we're going to package that, transmit to the Regional Water Board, and propose that we call the cease and desist order complied with, and that going forward we have a risk-based capital planning program as well as O&M program that's captured in this update of the IMP. So we have a strategy that's unfolding, and we're on time. I want to thank staff here. It hasn't just been myself and Stephen Mixes, but also engaging the operation and maintenance division, different crews and their perspective on the camera work we do and the repair work we do, the line maintenance we do, and the pump stations, and having that inform our program. Really trying to reduce the ongoing maintenance, have a maintenance-driven capital program. And so that's coming together, and it'll keep me pretty busy. That's part of the reason why I'm so glad to have Phil Benedetti, the associate engineer, because he's going to be getting the capital program prepped and up and running for this coming year. We have a couple guests here at the meeting that are going to be working on that with our team, as I make sure that our management of the compliance issues and the planning goes smoothly in parallel. Okay, that's 3. Number 4, this is a short one. We applied in October for a Cal OES grant because special districts were invited to apply for funding, several million, many millions of dollars statewide to fund backup power for PSPS, public safety power shutoffs. And we applied for $300,000 because we had some proposed outlays. Part of our capital program, we're upgrading 3 pump stations in Larkspur. We're in design right now. You approved the IMP work for Newt Engineering to plan the lift stations capital work. That was eligible. So the $120,000 that you approved, I think it was November or October, we put that in the application and we were denied. There just wasn't enough money to go around in the state to serve, to provide funding for all of the eligible applicants for public safety power shutoff backup generator improvements. So a lot of the eligibility, the higher scoring applications were based on affordability. And so we're not a disadvantaged community. And so we have a steeper hill to climb to qualify for a lot of the grant funds that are out there. So we did not receive the funds, but we gave it our best, scored 102 out of 156. All right, number 5, the Casa Conference. Okay, this one we could go on for a while, so I want to be careful. And we need to do this some other time, right? But I know in the press you've probably heard a lot about wastewater-based epidemiology. Wastewater-based epidemiology, WBE. When I saw that, I thought women-owned business enterprises, right? WBE. No, it's a new WBE. It was in the press, a lot of press about tracking COVID-19 using wastewater, right? And I know you all are interested. A lot of the public is. It's like, oh, this is a tool. We can really find where the virus may be more prevalent in certain neighborhoods based on sampling, the trunk line system wastewater, right? And maybe providing feedback to the public health experts. And certainly, here at Ross Valley, we're doing some studies of debris, and we could just have our staff pull a sample for virus, right? And help out. Well, so I attended this breakout session, and yes, this is happening, but it's at a research level, and it really is not operational. So the press has been kind of leading folks to think, oh, we're really, wastewater is helping guide things. The answer is no, it's not at all. It's a research project, and there's hope that we're setting up a system that in future pandemics, county health could rely on as information to guide things. But you know what county health is relying on now? It's what we all see when we go on the websites. It's hospitals. You know, how many cases are happening at the hospitals? That's where they have the actual data where it's happening. They're missing out a little bit in terms of they can't really look at neighborhoods as much based on hospitals. They can look at wider, you know, coarser looks at geography. So the bottom line is it's in developmental stages and there's no bandwidth, there's no capacity at the universities to process all the samples to make it operable. It is not an operational way to track COVID today. It might be in a year. But everything is really on a research level. They're going to look back at data because they're backlogged and they can't take any more samples. But CMSA, you know, has participated. You know, Jason is working with the Berkeley Water Center. They're collecting samples. They have to be kept at a certain temperature, so there's only so much they can keep. And it's going to be a really good research project, and it'll have recommendations for down the road. But at this point, county health is not calling treatment plants at all. That's not where they go for the information. But someday, you know, this research will be made more operational, and I hope that's the case. Excuse me, I hope that's the case because I think the preliminary information is, yeah, you know, you can have a real-time monitoring program, but if your samples are waiting in a warehouse, in a refrigerator warehouse for 3 months, that's not going to really tell you much about what's going on right now. So anyway, I thought I'd tell that little story about what I learned. You know, it's exciting and yet it's not operational.
Just real quick comment about CMSA. They're actually pulling from two places, at the headworks, and they're also, what Steve said was, in order to have more granularity in the sample, they also are pulling from a pump station in the Canal District because they felt that that's one area that's a hot spot in Marin County. So they're doing both.
Yeah, and that'll be really interesting data to look back on, you know, and kind of track and learn about how you might be able to use it in real time in the future. Also at CASA, the CSRMA, right, the California Sanitation Risk Management Authority, which we're a member. They have their meetings along with the CASA, and just a couple of real high level things. You know, they said, the quote was, "There's unusual drama these days." And what does that mean? One of the examples is property insurance is skyrocketing because of the catastrophic losses that have been compounding, whether it's the wildfires in California or Hurricane Harvey and other natural disasters, COVID, you know, related, what have you. I'm not sure about insurance and property insurance effects of that, but there's a compounding effect over the last few years. And this year, brace yourself, the annual increase for property insurance this year is 35%. 35%. And so while CSRMA has helped us out tremendously by pooling liability among sanitary districts for things like workers' compensation or just general liability, there's a pooled liability system. They're strongly considering pooling property insurance for our pump stations, you know, and different holdings, you know, or office buildings because of this skyrocketing insurance situation. So yeah, I guess in 2020 there were 83 billion with a B claims in the United States. The worst year though was in 2017. We exceeded that amount. I don't have the exact amount. So a little bit of there. And there also is this idea, this notion of social inflation. Have you heard about that? Who's heard of the term social inflation? Assistant General Manager Newhouse has. Social inflation, let me see if I can get this right because I've never really read the definition. It relates to jury settlements, you know, in terms of damages that plaintiffs claim against probably public agencies, but other corporations, that sort of thing. There's been an exponential rise in jury settlements for punitive damages that have been so significant that it's really affected insurance rates. across the board. So that may also be factored into that major annual increase in property insurance. All right, we're getting close. I'm at number 6. And I want to show a picture. Julia, can you let me share my screen? So this is the Easement Initiative. I gave you some emails over the weekend because we're excited about what we're working on the outreach. We're a little apprehensive too, because when we reach out to all the property owners, we got to spend some time educating folks what's going on. I want to put up a picture of a real easement.
Amor, are you able to share your screen?
Yeah, do you see it?
Yes, thank you.
Everybody see this? Yeah, so this is an example of what we're up against. This isn't a brand new fence, but this is a fence that's over one of our manholes. And we need to access every single manhole and rod hole in our system over time. It's not like we have to do it every year per se, but we really do need to open these up. This is how we view the condition of our pipe system. This is how we dislodge root-related clogs, fat soils and grease, things that don't belong in the sewer, like wipes that don't degrade. We have to periodically access our system. And so when a property owner makes a decision like this, we've got to work with them to figure out, okay, can we replace this with a gate, so that we can open it up and get into the system here? Because there's really no exceptions to the need to get to every location over a period of time. And so this is one example of the challenge. Let's see, I've got another. Is there a way to, well, anyway. Oh yeah, there we go. This one I like to call the Indiana Jones Lateral. This is up in Kent Woodlands, I believe. And, so this is actually, we have structures like this throughout Ross Valley. This one's pretty extreme, right? But this is an example of what we're dealing with in terms, this is a lateral that goes along a bridge, which, you have to be careful because you might have a group of people coming the other way. No, I'm just kidding. Not Indiana Jones. But at any rate, we have some above ground systems like this, that we have to meet, gravity sewers have to have a certain slope and, a certain diameter. And sometimes these canyons get in the way, and the creative solutions are out there. And you see the manhole there. Well, that's something we need to have access to. And we need to have a safe way to get to that point and to have equipment access that point with our hoses and that sort of thing. So I thought you might enjoy some of my illustrations. Okay, Julia, that's all. And then finally, just to wrap this up, and actually we have Gabriella and Lawrence here. And Lawrence has been helping us a lot with getting the materials together. And Patrick Filippelli of our staff has put together that beta version of the website. I hope you had a chance to maybe look at that, where you can see our sewer map overlaid with properties so that property owners can find their property, get their APN number. And the goal of the Easement Initiative is very simple. It's communication. That is the goal. And we want to, in a neighborly way, get contact information that's current, so that there's no surprises, that we contact people in advance when we need to get out and get into that manhole and clean that sewer. And we have a system so that we don't open that gate and let the pet out, let the dog out. We have individualized plans for each property, and we can put that in our info asset system so that when we do daily work orders to do maintenance work, that contact information comes out. And we can do it in advance. It says, we need to do a couple days in advance because that's what the property owner's preference is. We can build that into our work order system. So that's the goal. This idea of the initiative was born out of grassroots requests from our line staff saying, management, we need help. We need your support so that we can contact people in advance and we don't surprise folks, or we don't have misunderstandings with our ratepayers. And so this is our attempt to respond to our workers' request and try to use the power of the web the internet to gather this information and to disseminate information. So it also includes brochures, frequently asked questions, and we'll have a website, a web page that will be launched this month. And we will do a mailing, and I think we're talking, Lawrence, 40, maybe north of 3,300 properties, right? So we have 15,700 accounts in Ross Valley, 15,700, 3,300 are properties that have sewers on them, public sewer. So anyway, I thought I should take a little time today to let you know about that and let the public know, because we're going to be launching this soon. We don't have a hard date, but we're looking at maybe the week of the February 22nd, making this publicly available. And our staff are ready to field the phone calls and the questions as they come up. And yeah, I want to acknowledge NB5, who's joining us at the meeting today. They're helping us with that. Okay, sorry for the long report, everybody, but there's a lot going on. And
That's all right.
Happy to answer any questions.
It was very worthwhile. All right. Do we take public comment on is there any comment from the board members or the public on Steve's report?
Just
All right.
real quick, Steve, one very quick question. Is that website available for us to demonstrate to some people outside of the board, or are we still under wraps?
Oh, well, it's all unofficial. It's not under wraps though. If you want to share it, yeah, it'll be public before too long, but I wanted to give the board members and staff a chance to try it out, see if there's anything confusing, any suggestions before we make it public.
Thank you. Okay, agenda item number 10, verbal report by board members and requests for future items. Does any board member have a report or request for future item? Seeing none. Oh, yes, Pam.
I'm not sure how this is going to come across. I'll try. So I brought up last month about the other managers not getting a bonus. And I'm wondering if we could have some kind of open dialogue about I think there's 2 other managers or 3? Is it 2 or 3? I think it was 2. Just to have a discussion about could they get a bonus? So that's it.
I remember that discussion, but I don't remember what. Andrea, was there legal counsel on that, or do we have to wait and agendize something to discuss it any further?
I mean, if we're going to have a conversation, including what the existing policies are, we should agendize it.
Okay. All right. Then that's a valid request for agenda item. Thank you, Pam.
There will be a kind of there's a logic, I mentioned this last month, there's a logical time to bring this up, which is when the contracts are up, but since they're not up until June of 2022, and the salary and benefits resolution for staff is updated in June of 2021, there's a logical time for us to have a robust discussion about that in June of 2021, if that would work for the board.
Yeah, sounds good.
Thank you. All right. If there are no more verbal reports by board members or requests for agenda items, we'll move on to the consent calendar. Does anyone have anything they'd like to pull from the consent calendar this month? Doug, are you trying to unmute? No? Okay. I saw you move forward.
I move we approve the consent calendar.
I'll
All right,
second.
Okay. Does any member of the
Just making sure we have no public comment.
Any
I
member of the
didn't-
public have any comment on the consent calendar? Seeing none. Okay. Julia, roll call vote, please.
Yes, thank you. Borstein,
Yes.
Gaffney,
Yes.
Kelly,
Yes.
Beggs.
Calling me? Yes.
Yes, sorry. Thank you. Scylla,
Yes,
unanimous vote. Thank you.
thank you. Agenda item number 12, consideration of an appeal for a retroactive lateral replacement grant at 27 Terrace Avenue in Kentfield. Felicia or Steve, who would like to introduce this item?
Can I make a point, Madam President?
Sure.
The person in question was on and seems to have shut off their cameras and mic. The mic might be shut up, but I'm wondering if they're still on and we can confirm that, or if we can have somebody call that person to ensure they're on.
Done that. Just texted Mr. Shaw and let him know that his item is up. So I texted him during the general manager's report to let him know that I could keep him apprised as to when his item was coming up again. So he should be joining us here in just another minute, assuming he checks his text messages here shortly. But as you can see, he has stayed logged into the meeting. So he is interested in, I think, actually speaking to the board tonight. So I can just start with a recap of Mr. Shaw's appeal to the board. He lives in Kentfield, and this might, be a little additional information that the board is certainly aware of, but it's worth keeping in mind or remembering that the district services 5 different jurisdictions, right? We have the town of Fairfax, the town of San Anselmo, the town of Ross, the city of Larkspur, and the unincorporated areas of the county of Marin. And each one of those individual jurisdictions has their own building department, issues their own building permits, and coordinates with district staff when those building permits trigger our lateral requirements. So it's actually quite a bit of coordination that I'd like to acknowledge actually our administrative staff that perform on a regular basis. Again, getting information about, who and what in which jurisdictions are pulling permits and when those permits are triggering our lateral ordinance. As you probably remember, if it's a remodel greater than $75,000 or if it's an addition of a bathroom. So with that kind of background information, we have
Yep, also a property sale, right? So
property
that
sale,
also.
right.
Right.
But those are done not necessarily in coordination with the building permits, but those building permits are coordinated with the different jurisdictions. So just checking my messages here. Oh, that's Melvin. He's saying goodnight. Okay. So Mr. Shaw went to the county of Marin. I guess he had a large remodel that he was undertaking back in September of 2019. And the county of Marin building department appropriately advised him that he was going to need to get sign off from the sanitary district for the compliance with our lateral ordinance. And so he came to the district, realized probably at that point that his lateral was not going to pass a compliance inspection, the pressure test. And for whatever reason, I'm not quite sure why he didn't apply for a grant at that point in time, but he didn't. And so fast forward a year and a half, his $75,000 plus remodel is come to a conclusion. He's now in position to get his final inspection from the building department from the county of Marin, and they remind him that they still require the district's sign off before they will sign off on their process. So it actually is a really good sort of checks and balances system that we have with these neighboring, these service area jurisdictions. And the county of Marin, I'll have to give them special credit because they are particularly diligent in this regard, more so maybe even than some of the other agencies. So Mr. Shaw realizes at this point in time, just recently in January of this year, that he will not get his final sign off from the county of Marin until he gets compliance from the district. So he engages with the plumbing contractor to replace his lateral, and unfortunately starts that work before he applies for the district's grant program. And that's kind of what brought this situation to the board's attention, is that he was disappointed that he wasn't didn't qualify for the grant program because he had started the work prior to getting the grant approval, which I have to say, and I'm sorry that the what am I trying to say? The attachments in the agenda item didn't show the highlighted that I intended, but attachment B is our lateral replacement grant program guide. And on page 41 of 91 of the packet, you'll see towards the bottom of the page that says, it's important that any repair work performed prior to receiving an approval letter from the district will not be eligible for a grant. So that's in bold. I meant to highlight it, but it is included in the information that we distribute to applicants. And we say it again on a couple of pages later, which would be page 44 of 91 of the packet, which is the actual grant program application. In the second paragraph at the top of the page, it says, I understand that any repair work performed prior to receiving a letter of approval from the district will not be eligible for a grant. So we do our very best to communicate to potential applicants of the grant program that we require them to get the grant approval prior to starting the work. And there's a couple of reasons for that. The most important probably being Mr. Shaw. Hi. Thank you. I hope you've been able to catch a little bit. I'm sorry? You're breaking up.
Can we have him call in on his cell phone rather than use the computer?
Yeah, you might want to use your computer for the video, the audio. So where was it? Maybe I'll just give.
I think, sir, I think we need you to mute yourself on the computer because we're all getting feedback. There, perfect. And then telephone in if you can to bring us your audio. Thank you.
Would you advise him of the phone number just so it's easier in case he doesn't have to look for it?
Yes.
Good evening.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, Mr. Shaw, that I put the phone number and access code into the chat of this meeting if you wanted to access that rather than from your email, but either way is fine.
I think Mr. Shaw has left the building.
Okay.
So
Well,
I'll just continue a little bit, again, summarizing kind of what was said in the staff report.
Felicia, excuse me, I think you were just about to say the important and an important reason, and you were just getting into that.
Yes.
Making that point after you emphasize that, yes, in bold all over the application,
Yeah.
it says that you're supposed to not start work before the grant, and importantly.
Right, importantly, the requirements, thank you. The requirements include, for the grant submittal, include submitting a video that documents the existing conditions of the lateral, providing justification for the use of public funds for the private improvements. And I will say also that just some of this process takes a little bit of time, receiving the grant application, reviewing the video footage, preparing the documents, doing some internal coordination. And so we ask for a minimum of 10 days, but I will say that our administrative staff is particularly generous with expediting approvals under situations where, there's an urgent need. So, so finally, I would just say that the ordinance that the district adopted does provide for emergency.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Perfect.
Oh, good.
Very good. Very good. I'm just wrapping up my summary statements, Mr. Shaw, and then I know you have some things that you'd like to address the board.
So you're the plaintiff and I'm the defendant at the moment, it sounds like.
Yes, you could say that. So just telling them that you had applied for a permit from the County of Marin and that you're in the position of needing a final inspection from them, which triggered your need to get the lateral permit from the sanitary district. And then I was reminding the board that the ordinance that the board adopted has very narrow exceptions for retroactive grant approvals. And those emergency situations are defined only when a sewer lateral fails, causing a private sewer overflow and requires an immediate replacement. So the only other thing that I would add to my statements is that, you know, the district has had this grant program in place since 2009. It's a very successful, robust program. We process upwards of 20 grants a month, ranging from $1,500 to $2,500. And if the, you know, unfortunately, I know it's very disappointing to Mr. Shaw, but if the district were in a situation where we were opening up grant approvals to work that had already occurred, then the consequences of that would, of course, be that many other applicants would be eligible to receive these grant funds, other than the ones who haven't yet started that work. So with that, I'll finalize, conclude my presentation and turn it back to the President Silla.
Okay, well, I'd like to address these issues. For the first issue is I did read the minutes that were to the board for today's meeting. And first of all, the permit application was required by the county earlier than it would have normally been obtained, because my planner wanted to prove that I'd signed up for the district to get a permit to replace the piping. I don't know how they got involved in that, but they did, and that's why the permit was actually obtained earlier. We didn't even have a building permit yet when we applied for that permit, because it was a condition of approval by our planner at the time, our plan checker. So that was the first problem. So we actually did start work within the year, which was in March or April. So we actually did start the work, and according to your own guidelines, I just had to start the work within a year, which we did do for the remodeling. So that, I think, is a moot point. The second point is I was never informed that you needed to apply 10 days prior to actually working. That would have been helpful, because I certainly would have applied 10 days before I'm working. I'm not trying to take advantage of the district. I had 161 feet of clay pipe that I'm sure was leaking because it was put in 1953. And if anything, it cost me $8,600, which is pretty much a bargain basement price to get all that relined. And then you've already done an inspection on it and seen that it's all brand new HDPE to the sewer main, even across the alley driveway. So I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel or make it so anybody in the future will come back and say they want credit for the $1,500. As a matter of fact, I actually did exactly what you told me to do. You wanted the pipes relined so they wouldn't leak, and they're pressure tested now. So that's all done. So I don't know why we're even having this problem, to be honest with you. I think it would be great if somebody applied for a permit through you, that you were clearer that it the grant had to be applied for 10 days prior to actually starting the work. Then I certainly would have done that. As soon as I found out you had to apply for the permit previously, I applied for it. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but I certainly followed all the guidelines, and you've got 161 feet of relined pipe that was definitely leaking. So I'm not sure what I can add to that, but.
Okay. Thank you. Now I'm going to take it to the board members and see if they have questions of Felicia or Mr. Shaw. Point of clarification for me, Felicia, these forms that we are seeing that say that the repair work that the grant must be applied for prior to the work beginning. These were forms that Mr. Shaw saw.
Yes, that's correct. He was provided these documents.
Okay, and he is saying 10 days before. I don't see anything in here that says 10 days before. It's simply prior.
That's correct. Our rule of thumb is our 10 days, but as I mentioned, the district staff does expedite those grant approvals by request from the applicant. But the main point is that the repair work shouldn't start until the approval letter has been issued.
Okay. Doug, do
Well,
you-
I certainly didn't know that, so I think this is where we're having the problem. So,
Right. Doug, did you have questions?
Well, I had two things. First off, Mr. Shaw, you're welcome to stay on the Zoom video. We didn't want you to log out of the Zoom video. We just didn't want you to use your computer audio. So you're welcome to
Oh, no,
log
I'm
back
just
in anytime.
afraid something
That's
would go wrong. So,
Okay.
actually, this is my first Zoom call. I'm a Zoom call virgin.
Ah, okay, fine.
I
Welcome
don't
to the
do
Zoom.
business every day that I have to be on Zoom. So,
Okay, when did you get the, so when you said within the year, that was from the county. Is that correct? Felicia first?
the county informed me I had to go down to your office, which I did, and paid for a permit. And that was, I think, I forget the exact dates. We didn't actually start work until April, but I think it was in November. I actually came down or to get an actual permit.
It was right.
That was a requirement by my county plan checker.
Were you given any information about the grant at the time?
I was told there was a grant available for $1,500 to reline basically sewer pipes. I said, that's great because mine definitely needs to be relined. And then my comment was, it's, basically there was there was something in there about it have to pass a 5-pound test. And my pipes were never going to pass a 5-pound test. I mean, there was just, 1953, 160 feet of clay pipe. It's not going to pass. So,
Why didn't you apply for the grant though?
Well, I didn't know you had to apply 10 days prior. I did apply for the grant as soon as I found out you had to apply for the grant, which was apparently after we already started work, and this is why we're having the problem.
How far after you started the work, by the way?
Day and a half, I believe, or 2 days. Because I didn't know about it. So as soon as I found out about it, I applied for it. So I thought we got a final approval and then we just did the grant. That's what I thought. But what silly me.
That would be an award, not a grant. A grant, like for example, when we apply for grants for flood mitigation, you apply to the State Water Resource Board for a grant. You tell them what the work is going to be, and then they either give you the grant or not. So it's not exactly a scholarship or an award. It's a grant because we want to ensure that the monies of the public are being used in a proper way. So that's why we say it's a grant that you apply for before that happens. That's the purpose of it.
Well, in this particular case, do you think you've been deceived in any way, shape, or form? Like I've tried to rip off the district for $1,500? I mean,
No, I don't think
that's
you've been
not my
trying
intention.
I think your application is fine in the sense that you're allowed to come to the board and ask for an exemption. So there's nothing about that.
Yeah, I'm just trying to be fair. I mean, I paid to reline the pipes, and the pipes are brand new all the way to the main. I've had other bids for $15,000 for the same work. I mean, I happened to pick somebody who was new and just started in the business and very aggressive, and that worked out great. Otherwise, it would have been $15,000 to reline the pipes. And that's why I'm bringing it to the board, I guess, because I feel that I was not. Over the years, I've paid fees to the district. For different projects I've done and subdivisions, and I feel that it was just a miscommunication in this case. And
Alicia,
I did pay to have the pipes relined. Your inspector inspected them, and he approved them, and it would pass the 5-pound test.
Right, and that's required regardless of whether a grant or the loan program is activated. That's what we do to make sure that the pipes are, going to keep the sewage off of your property and get it to our sewage treatment plants. So, Felicia, when Mr. Shaw came in originally, he was handed a piece of paper that said you need to apply. If you want to apply for a grant or a loan, you need to do that prior to starting work. That's not.
Yeah, the lateral replacement grant program guideline is provided to everybody who submits for a building. Not a building permit. I'm sorry, a lateral permit to get my agencies correct. So the lateral permit that Shaw applied for in September of 2019, he would have been provided that information at that time.
Okay. And the policy that we're concerned about, we don't want to encourage people to come to us after they've begun work and try and apply to the grant or the loan program because.
So there's a couple of reasons. One is that we want to ensure that we're getting documentation for the work that it's being done to justify the public funds for the use of a private improvement. So this is our documentation as a public agency that we're appropriately paying these public funds.
Okay. Pam, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just want to back up a little bit for the process. So when somebody comes in to the counter and says, I'd like to apply for a lateral grant, you hand them some paperwork that needs to be filled out. Is that what you do, or somebody does?
Yes,
There.
that's what somebody does.
Okay, so there's two ways to do this. They can hand you the paperwork and you can do it in writing, or can you do it online? Is that right?
You can download the form from the website.
Okay, so it's still a written thing, but nobody actually sits down, or of course it's COVID, sorry, or says, and by the way, we have this 10-day, rule that's really important. We just hand them papers. Yeah,
I appreciate the question, Director Meg.
Yeah, nobody's, I'm not saying you're wrong, but I even know in my own world, I probably wouldn't look at it. So I'm just trying to see the innocence in it.
Yeah, and it's been a long time since Mr. Shaw first came to the district. Remember, he was issued his lateral permit in September of 2019, which is pre-COVID, right? And so he came to the counter, paid his $250 by check, was issued this lateral permit at that time, and then was handed this, grant program application material, which, as I pointed out, states in a couple of different places that the grant has to be approved before the work starts. But to Mr. Shaw's point, and I can certainly relate to this, you're about to start construction and maybe there's a lot of other stuff going on, and you put that stack of paper somewhere thinking, I'm going to get to that when I get to it. And he unfortunately got to it after he started work on it.
On a big
I actually don't remember receiving anything that said I had to apply for it previously or told that. Would have been nice if somebody said, by the way, you have to apply for the grant prior to starting the work. Nobody actually said a word about that.
Okay, well,
so just I just want to finish. I'll be quick. So what I'm thinking is maybe for the future process, they actually sign something that says this is the 10-day rule. That way they see it, they sign for it. Because when you're doing a $75,000 remodel, that's probably the least thing you're going to be worried about. So that's it.
Thank you, Director.
Yes, Tom.
That seems like a great idea, actually, because if that had happened, then that wouldn't have been a problem. I wouldn't be in front of the board right now. I would have applied for that immediately, if not sooner.
Okay. Tom, did you have a comment?
Oh, I have a couple of questions. You applied for a permit to replace your lateral in September 2019. Why didn't you apply for a grant then?
Because I didn't know I had to apply for a grant prior to, because it involved getting somebody out here to actually TV the lines. And secondly, I was 100% sure, maybe more than 100%, that these lines were going to fail. They were definitely going to fail because they were clay pipes from 1953. So there are clay pipes in Istanbul that are 2,000 years old. They probably leak. Wouldn't you think they'll apply for the permit early?
But here's the situation. We're using public money to help out private people repair a facility they own. And the reason we can use public money to do that is because we have to find a public benefit. And the public benefit is that we have to prove that your pipe is leaking. And so I don't see where it says you have to do a pressure test to determine if your pipe is leaking. You could do a TV scan, which is what almost everybody does. And then you submit the proof and we say, okay, we can use public money for a private individual to accomplish a purpose, that we want. But we have to prove it before. And I'm seeing do not start the work in 2 places. Any repair work performed prior to receiving an approval letter from the district will not be eligible for a grant. And so, I mean, we could, I don't know what we do, make the letters 5 inches high or something. It's all over this. And it protects us from using public money for a private arrangement. And another thing is, I believe we've given out 2,000 grants. I'm not sure. Do we have a number? I think we're well over 1,000 grants. And we've only had one other person not apply for a grant, at least in my, that's what I think.
Well, in that case, you're better off because people don't bring them to the board and say they have a problem. I guess you have to ask 2 questions here. One is, I was told there was a 5-pound pressure test. I'm in this, I have an A engineering license. I was told there was a 5-pound pressure test that had to pass. I know clay pipes. I've done a lot of directional boring, done a lot of different things, and clay pipe will not pass a 5-pound pressure. Not even one joint will pass from 1953, 5-pound pressure test. So that was a waste of time, totally. And I understand you're trying to protect the district from being abused in any way, shape, or form for, $1,500, but I'm not trying to abuse you. I literally relined 161 feet of pipe. So I can see why. Yeah, I'm just making the point. I'm not asking for anything that's out of the exception to reline the pipes. The pipes have been relined.
Okay.
And they have been tested by your people at the district.
Okay, Doug, do you have a comment?
I just want to make the point that I think he's looking at the pressure test the wrong way. If it passed the 5-pound pressure test, he wouldn't have had to replace the pipe. Of course, he would have failed. So that's just that the logic isn't really there, but that's okay. That's not a big deal.
Okay, so I'll bring it back to the board. Is there any more discussion or comments? Yes, Doug?
I'm just going to put this out there. We've had 2,000 with only one other person, and that means the system's working. We can change this and make it better, but there is always an exception to the rule. It's not that big a deal. It's not like he contacted us 8 months later.
Andrew, we had some discussion at the finance committee layer of, when we have an ordinance, or when we have, I guess this isn't an ordinance, a procedure that says this is how this is what you have to do. And then we make an exception. Sometimes sometimes we have discretion, as in the case of the connection fees. Sometimes our ordinances specifically leave us a layer of discretion. This does not. If we, as I always say, if we wanted to be Santa Claus, would we need to make specific findings so that everybody who found out they were late couldn't come and say, oh, we were late, me too? Or do you think we just shouldn't do it because the ordinance is clear about the rules?
There are exceptions. I'll just say there are exceptions in the ordinance. They're strict. We didn't talk about that, but there's for emergency,
right,
and other. Yeah. So in that
the facts presented to us do not fall under one of the exceptions.
Right.
So, what do you think about us considering offering a grant to this gentleman?
I think the cleanest 2 options are, number 1, you reject the appeal because it doesn't comply with the resolution and the rules, and the resolution very clearly defers to the rules, and as you say, doesn't list any sort of appeal process. The second clean option would be to modify the resolution to provide for a process and then basically handle this in arrears. Right? I think you've done that before, where you've decided to modify a program and then you have and applied that retroactively to somebody, understanding that that others could come forth in a way that may or may not be predictable. So I think those are the 2 cleanest paths. I mean, I don't think I think you could just create an exception for this, but it's a little bit messy from the precedent perspective and from the, what are the standards? And then you struggle with the idea that you may be doing things arbitrarily, and that, in this case may not be a huge issue, but in the big picture, it's not a good practice from a governance perspective.
Yeah, my take on it is that regardless of whether Mr. Shaw understood that he needed to apply before he began the work, that is what all the paperwork says. And I don't think it's an unusual thing to ask for people to do something before you give them money. So my inclination is not to have an exception to the rule in this case, but I welcome, I mean, Doug, I think you make a good point.
How,
I did apply before we finished. As soon as I found out there was a problem during the process. So is a portion, my question then, is a portion of the work that exceeded $1,500 that was done after I applied, does that count for the $1,500 grant? So if the whole job was $8,600, and we hadn't finished it yet, and there was a portion of work that was left for $2,500, does that mean I should be granted the grant for the $2,500 worth of work that wasn't done yet? I guess from that perspective.
Well, it's all done now, sir, correct?
Well, yeah, now it's after the fact because I had to finish it. I can't leave everything open because I had neighbors. Yeah.
This is a grant and loan program, and from my perspective, envisioned for people, homeowners who say, I have to do this. Wow, it's a lot of money. What, and now I have this opportunity to, the district is going to help me with it.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, but you didn't read the paperwork. And so if you don't read the paperwork, I don't think you get to say, give me an exception afterwards. That's my perspective anyway. And
okay. You obviously don't agree in approving this grant. I think it's completely legitimate because you got the work.
Pardon me, sir. Tom, pardon me, sir. I'm taking it to the board, please. Tom,
okay, fine.
Yeah, my comment is, let's say we postpone this and then try to amend our ordinance there. How in the world would we amend the ordinance? I don't know how we would do that. It's just the thing we don't want to have happen. What we're anxious is to prove that we got a project that provided a public benefit. And so I'm kind of with Doug. I think, it's not that it's $1,500 is a lot to Mr. Shaw, not so much to in our picture, but I just think we're opening up a can of worms and just what we don't want. We have I see it's in bold print in two places. It's a paragraph in one, separated out. I don't see how you could miss it.
Right. And I just want to be clear, was a pressure test or a video, was the old plate?
Yeah, a video was done, yes, because we did that prior to starting the work. That's correct.
A video was done prior to the work?
Yes, just prior, and they showed up and they wanted to, they had to see where the pipes were. And so they ran a video and a toning, they toned the pipe out at the same time.
Well, maybe that might be, if a video of prior work, it wasn't approved by the district.
Was it shown to the district?
Does a prior video show problems in your pipe?
Yes, it shows it clay pipe and it shows it separated, yeah.
Yes, Pam.
This is a little bit of a tricky, weird one, but the fact that he came forward immediately to try and remedy the situation, though I know this 10-day thing, the fact that he's here and explaining and trying to create, he was really working hard to get it done right. It's just he didn't have the 10-day situation. I don't know. I'm not clear on. I guess people just do. They space out or they don't check it or whatever. But I feel that he's really making an effort to get that pipe fixed, and he did do a scope. So I'm feeling like I want to help him. It's $1,500, but it's like a good partnership that he made the effort to get rid of the leaking pipe. So that's.
Can I make a suggestion, Board President? Let's put this agenda item to bed and put an agenda item on to discuss whether we could amend the ordinance at all, because I feel the way I feel, but I also feel very strongly that I need to listen to the advice of our attorney. And if there's no room in the current ordinance for an override, then there's no point in having this continue tonight. We cannot change the ordinance without putting that on the agenda. I'd be interested in putting it on the agenda and then reviewing Mr. Shaw's application if we change the ordinance at that time and at that meeting.
Yeah, Andrea, I was thinking about this. If we wanted to establish a grace period and then maybe make it retroactive, do you think that would be legally justifiable with evidence that the pipe, that the lateral did need repair post?
Sure. For purposes of this situation, yeah, I think that's legitimate. And Tom, to your earlier question as to how it could be modified, you could incorporate some sort of appeals process that gives the board broad discretion to consider whatever it feels appropriate in considering an appeal. And then you could do this. And from time to time, if somebody brings it up, you would have pretty broad discretion. You still have, I think, the general issue of making sure that you're not acting arbitrarily. But I think we could draft it in a way that would give you exactly the kind of discretion that you're looking for this evening.
Do you know what might
be there to guide us on that legal situation anyway, Andrea?
Mary?
Say again?
You would be there to guide us on that legal situation. Should we put this on a
We could
future
bring
agenda?
some options. Staff could bring some options to the board as to how to modify it.
Yeah, okay.
Do you know what might work as an exception is that if after the fact proof was submitted, and it sounds like in Mr. Shaw's case that he did do a video, which was before the work. And so if that video showed, this may be the way we can amend the ordinance if proof was submitted after, something like that.
Yeah,
so,
and like I said, a grace period. So such that if somebody came in and said, oh my gosh, I just redid my lateral yesterday as part of this work and I didn't know about your grant and loan program, then we could say, oh, well, there is a grace period. And if you can provide this evidence, then okay, so we're tabling the item for tonight and we'll ask the staff to bring us back.
I move that we table the item for tonight and put this on the agenda for discussion.
Okay.
Second.
I'll second that.
Motion.
Okay, well, thank you for your time.
You're welcome, Mr. Shaw.
You're not done yet, Mr. Shaw.
It sounds like I'm through, actually. If
Mr. Shaw.
Lisa's done with me, I'm through. But anyway, so,
Mr. Shaw, next time feel free to use your computer to log on and then just use the phone number to call in. A lot of people do that.
oh, they do. Okay, I'm computer literate to some extent, but not an
Now you
expert by any means. So.
We'll teach you how to use Zoom.
That would
And
be
I think
good.
the board has done the best they could for you tonight.
Mhm.
All right. Well, thanks very much, and I look forward to future meetings on this.
Thank you.
And we'll see how it goes.
Very good.
Okay.
And I'll circle back with you, Mr. Shaw. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
All right, we have a motion. and a second. Doug moved and Michael seconded. Julia, will you call the roll?
Yes, thank you, President Silla. Borstein,
Yes.
Gaffney,
Yes.
Kelly,
Yes.
Meggs,
Yes.
Silla,
Yes,
unanimous vote. Thank you.
thank you. Thank you, Doug. for leading us out of the, yes, Pam, you need to go, don't you? Is that correct?
I need to go. I apologize. I totally forgot this meeting was moved and I had a prior engagement. So I will see you in the near future.
Okay, thanks. Good night.
No indoor dining, Pam.
What? What,
No
Doug?
indoor dining. No French laundry.
No
You're
indoor
no
dining.
fun. You're no fun.
Okay. Pardon me, I got back in the Financing Authority agenda by accident. Agenda item number 13, consideration of authorizing the general manager upon review and approval of council to execute task orders 11 and 12 with Jill Barnes Consulting. Steve.
Thank you, President Zilla. Yeah, this item proposes to engage Jill Barnes, and she's joining us there. Hi, Jill. See her over there on the screen. In approving a couple of task orders to add on to a consulting agreement, a master's consulting agreement that was set up many years ago. And so Ms. Barnes has helped out the district in using project management support services because of the great quantity of capital projects that had to be executed to be in compliance with the cease and desist order. And so Ms. Barnes has a lot of experience in the Ross Valley Sanitary District, augmenting our staff management of various capital projects. And they tend to be the gravity sewer projects that are sometimes fairly intimate with neighborhoods. And so Jill has been very effective working with neighbors that are affected by close proximity of construction, but also working with the towns and the jurisdictions, working through encroachment permit requirements, traffic control, helping us keep track of environmental requirements if we have to do bird nesting surveys by mitigation measures in our mitigated neg deck, et cetera, et cetera. And so she's really been an effective team member. And this last year, we had her, the previous two task orders help us stay on track with the force main appurtenance project that was completed last fall, as well as the Laurel Grove gravity sewer project, which is just finishing up right now in terms of the final paving. And in those two projects, as I mentioned in the staff report, Jill Barnes Consulting had an overall budget of around $170,000, but the final tally has been less. So, when we ask for budget approval, we try to be as accurate as we can, but in that case, she came under budget by a good $40,000 or $50,000 for last year's authorizations. And maybe it was because, we were able to get some of the work done in-house, working with Phil Benedetti, who was hired around June, for instance. But it's been a good relationship and value to the district, and she's sort of the face of the district out there. And this is the third leg of a three-leg project in Butterfield, where she knows the players. She's done community meetings, and we have actually our NV5 consultants here who've helped out supporting the community meetings for Butterfield, where we have, very close quarters with residents and schools and tough traffic situation, and also needed to meet tough pavement standards in that area. And Jill's very familiar with all of that. And so we think it's a good value to do a sole source arrangement with her to continue to support us on project management. We have an added complexity with the Butterfield project this year because we got state funding, the SRF funding, and Jill's going to help us keep track of those things as well, along with the project team. So, more heads in the room to keep track of all those moving parts. SRF funding is federal funding and has requirements like Buy American Iron and Steel and those kind of things. So Jill, we'll be looking to you to keep an eye on making sure we're following all that along with the rest of the team members. And then also, I just want to note a small task order. We've asked Jill to help us with developing an RFP, a request for proposals for construction management on another gravity sewer project that will come a few months later that touches a few neighborhoods around the region, and we've talked about this one. It's the fiscal 2021 gravity sewer project, and so we're asking Jill to help organize that process because we're managing a lot of things in parallel the next couple months, getting this summer's construction season together. So I've set up a task order proposed for that as well. And then, it'll be an opportunity for her to train our associate engineer, Phil, on how to efficiently do an RFP process. Because there have been a fair number of sole source arrangements I want to acknowledge, but it's really been in the name of efficiency and institutional memory and value to the district. But it's not my intent or philosophy to always do sole source contracts, and this forthcoming RFP is an example of that. So with that, thanks for letting me do the long introduction, but I want to give Jill Barnes, introduce her again to you and give her a chance to talk about the scope of work for the Butterfield project and some of the things that her observations about the challenges and opportunities for this project. Jill?
Sure. Thank you, General Manager Steve, and good evening, Madam President and Board of Directors. I'm really pleased to present this proposal and get an opportunity to work on the third and final leg of the Butterfield improvements, the sewer rehabilitation in the Butterfield Canyon area. And I think that with the first project for Butterfield and the second, the district and I were able to come up with a good model of public outreach and identifying the important stakeholders in the area. It's a tight project, and Butterfield Road is really the only way in and out. It also has some fire danger considerations where it's important that the district in this project work closely with the fire district. I think that we started with a project information sheet, inviting folks out to a community meeting something like 4 years ago, and we did another meeting on the second project with postcards to everybody in the canyon. I think that was almost 3,000 properties. I think that went a long way to getting folks introduced to the kind of impacts they were going to experience and how the district and the project were going to do their best to reduce those impacts as much as possible and keep open communication so that if folks had special access issues, they could let us know and we could work with them. For this last piece of Butterfield, it'll be a little different. I think we'll have some sewer line that's in the front yards of properties along Butterfield. So I'll be looking to work pretty directly with those folks so that they understand what the work's going to look like and what they can expect when the project is done and the district is ready to leave the area. So there is a little bit of, there's more maybe cultural impacts on this or mitigation measures that we'll watch because there's more open cut trench work on this piece of the project as opposed to the other two. So I'll be working with Integral and their sub-consultants to make sure we've got the archaeologist and the tribe out to observe that work as they need to. Otherwise, the town, as Steve touched on, very specific road paving requirements, and we'll work closely with them to make sure we can make them as happy as possible while keeping the district's interests at the forefront. And that'll be the plan for the project. I thank you for your time.
Thank you. We're all familiar with your work, Jill, and I think in support of having you more with us. The Finance Committee reviewed this. Any board members have any questions or comments at this time? Yes, Doug.
I'm absolutely fine with this award, but I wanted to ask Steve, and especially in the event that Jill is putting out postcards again, what is the plan for Broadmoor to Butterfield, I'm sorry, to be paved? Because we patched it and then we thought we were going to pave it and then we didn't pave it, but then there was a plan, and I'd like the residents to know if there's any news that's good. If there's no news, then never mind. But if there's going to be, maybe on the very bottom of a postcard, it might say, by the way, the town will be paving Butterfield on their own in April of 2025, or whatever the answer is. Do you know anything about that?
No, I don't know offhand, but we have team members here, whether it's Jill or even Justin, who may have a clue. As I don't remember the latest commitment that the town had, but we did take care of some of the paving on Meadowcroft, for instance.
Yeah, but it was Butterfield that people were, speaking about, and we patched it nice, but it at some point it needs to be paved. And I know the town was going to do that. And you and I talked about that long ago, that we were going to do it as part of our project, and then we didn't because there was more open cut because of MMWD stuff that was going on, and maybe even some Comcast stuff. So that never happened. But there was a plan. But I think it was the town's plan, not our plan.
Jill, go ahead.
It seemed to me like the town at one time had plans to do a cape seal or some type of maintenance seal on Butterfield up to roughly Brookside School. I don't know if that's still in their budget, though. It seems to me like that maybe got pulled back for budget issues.
Well, if somebody can just reach out to Sean Condry, he'll know off the top of his head. By the way, it's probably on the town website. I'll take a look myself, but somebody could just call Sean. And if we get any information from him, I'd like Jill to know that, just so that she can put, it'll make people happy. It's good news. Santa's coming at some point.
We will be cleaning up after ourselves. Okay, great. Seeing no public, I believe, on the call. Yes, Doug?
I'd move to authorize the general manager, unless we're not ready for that. I'd authorize the general manager, upon review and approval of council, to execute task orders 11 and 12 with Jill Barnes Consulting in the total amount of $130,660 for project management support services on the Butterfield Arroyo Kendrick Gravity Sewer Improvement Project, project number 947, and consultant selection for construction management services for fiscal year 2021 Gravity Sewer Improvement Projects, which is project number 951.
Second.
Thank you. Julia, roll call vote, please.
Thank you. Borstein,
Yes.
Gaffney,
Yes.
Kelly,
Yes.
Meggs is absent. Scylla,
Yes.
401 vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good. All right, agenda item number 14, consideration of approving and authorizing the general manager upon review and approval of council to approve tax order 6 with SOMAS in the total of $265,610 for project 947. Steve.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, President Scylla, and thanks to Justin for hanging in there for the board meeting. Justin Sue for SOMAS is with us, and I'll let him provide some comments. I don't have to reintroduce the project. It's the same project, the Butterfield project, and we are getting things lined up to have the funding mechanism all in place and to go out to bid and receive bids in time to award the contract in the May timeframe so that we can break ground on June 15th. It's a very specific window in the Butterfield project between June 15th and August 15th when the Brookside School is out, as well as the Hidden Valley School, which is up the road, and traffic to that school is impacted by construction in this area. So that's a challenge, especially dovetailing this with the federal funding. It's a challenge. We can meet the challenge, but we need to assemble the team and be on top of it. And this is a good time of the year for us to get these arrangements together. So between working with Jill and then of course Justin, who's really been a key player for the district, getting projects delivered on time and on budget, and in keeping good community relations too, being responsive as we go along with each property owner if they have issues. Justin and his team really showed that ability last summer on the 2 projects that they managed for us very efficiently, and we got them on time. The things that weren't on time were out of our control, right? COVID was impacting manufacturing and all that stuff, but we were able to get things done. And so this is a great fit for us to continue working with Justin, given his experience working on the previous leg on Butterfield. So he knows that road very well. And with that, Justin, I just like you to make any remarks you have thinking about this project and the challenges and opportunities ahead.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jim. President, Silla, board members. As Steve mentioned, we're bringing back the same team that we did Butterfield with prior years. Same team that we have out right now on Laurel Grove. My inspector, was really great on the ground. Last year, when we did Butterfield, we actually brought that project in under budget and on time, maintained the constraints. So I think it's, definitely in the district's best interest, bringing in the same team, one for the institutional knowledge and just for the public outreach, perspective, keeping our inspectors has been a great public face for the district, to toot his own horn. But there's already mentioned, some of the challenges on this project. Just the timing is going to be a big one. And assuming school is back in next year, it'll be especially important to be off of Butterfield when the time, by the time school's there. So, there'll be a lot of pressure on us this year for this project, but we definitely have the team pulled together to make that happen and deliver this project on time. Thank you. Look
Great.
forward to it.
Yes, Tom.
Well, I'm looking at, the project is scheduled for June through August, but your chart on hours, which is attachment C, shows a lot of work June, July, August, September, and October. And I mean, it even starts, I kind of asked this question in finance, but what's the overlap? Why does it go on for 5 months? I thought it was a 2-month project.
The constraints on Butterfield are restricted to June through, I believe, the first or second week in June through second week of August. There is ancillary work on the sides that can go on outside of that time frame. And the construction period that we've shown covers the entire construction window. If the project is done sooner, then obviously we will only bill for the time that that we're out there. Our hours will accrue there. But that construction, June through October does cover the anticipated construction window. We don't have the final specs yet, so we don't know exactly when, what working days are going to be allotted. Once that comes in, we can amend this budget to reflect that.
But you're going to be off of Butterfield in 2 months. Is that the deal? And then moving on to the other streets, Arroyo and Kendrick. Is that what's happening?
So, yeah, the ancillary work, and again, I don't have the exact schedule with the specifications not being published yet. But yeah, that is the idea.
Yeah, there'll be the contract time will extend out to October, November, because there is, the reconnection of laterals. We're gonna have a bid alternate to potentially do Lower Fawn Drive. You might recall Harris and Associates has added that design. Last month we approved that scope, and so that doesn't have to be restricted to those times. And so we're creating a longer window for all of the work, but there's specific work, that bigger sewer in the center of Butterfield, that has to happen in those months. And then the abandonment of the smaller lines in the front yards and the reconnection of laterals, that doesn't have to be so strict.
All right. Anything else? I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move that we approve and authorize the general manager upon review of council and approval of council to approve task order number 6 with Somas Inc. in the total amount of $265,610 for construction management services for the Butterfield Royal Kenrick Gravity Sewer Improvement Project number 947.
Thank you. Second?
It's second, but I think Tom should say not to exceed.
Okay. In a not to exceed amount.
I'll second that.
Julia, a roll call vote, please.
Yes, thank you, President Silla. Borstein,
Yes.
Gaffney,
Yes.
Kelly,
Yes.
Meigs is absent, Silla.
Yes,
Vote carries 401. Thank you.
thank you. All right, thank you, Justin. You may be excused.
Thanks for joining us.
All right. Good
Gonna be
night,
quite
guys.
a year.
Agenda item number 5, informational items, monthly operations, and annual report on community outreach metrics. Steve, anything you want to highlight for us? We've used more than 100,000 gallons of recycled water. I love it.
I'll bet you the North Bay Watershed Association would be interested in that factoid. Just saying.
Thank you, Michael. Please feel free to share that with them.
I will.
Great. Anything you want to pull out, Steve? Nope, you used up all your words in the general manager's report. Just kidding.
Doug would like to say something.
Please.
Yeah, generally a great report as always on this, but I always like more information on the SSOs. So what happened here? Where was this?
174 Meadowcroft, and what happened was a significant amount of debris was found on the line. Basically, when the jet truck goes through it, it eviscerates roots and wipes, but there was evidence of wipes and 3/4 inch rock. I'm working actively with the general manager on coming up with a plan and public outreach, which will letters will be sent out to plumbers and rooter personnel on the 18th, and just, hey, let notify us if there's any breach where your material can come into our line. So there will be a failure analysis report given to the general manager next week, and we'll be investigating the upstream and anything that possibly could have occurred via new laterals or repair work, any water. We're going to look at 811 USA, that's the underground survey alerts, and just trying to see how this line backed up. I was proud of the guys for responding quickly and adequately and cleaning up the backyard and preventing a Category 1 overflow. But again, we're going to provide the general manager a failure analysis report next week.
So that came up at 174 Meadowcroft, but it wasn't necessarily 174 Meadowcroft lateral or pipes or property. It happened to them, not because of them. Is that beyond my understanding?
Correct. Yes, there was a blockage in the main. Absolutely. We have all the videos, and I'm actually looking at the SSO report right now. But yes, there's just, we're looking into how to mitigate the amount of debris that comes into our lines, and basically it gets captured in sags in pipes. There's all kinds of different variables, but we do take this seriously, and we're looking into it.
Oh, I know you do. I mean, look, this is still fabulous, Stephen. You guys do a great job. These numbers in past years were, like in the millions, so 770 gallons, it happens, it happens in every district, in every part of the country, in every part of the world. So this is still very good. And, we've had months with none. So please don't think I'm anything but wildly impressed with the staff. I'm not.
No, trust me, we take this very personally, and I'd like several months of no spill reports. So yes, we're actively looking for that.
Good.
Great. Okay, now I think are we having a presentation by NV5, or are we just?
Yes, we thought, I received some updates on the outreach efforts, and I thought it was kind of an annual summary, and I'll introduce Gabriella Dow and Lawrence McGuire, who work for NV5 on our behalf and have for many years now. And whether it's outreach for capital projects or, GM bulletin that we work together on, or, keeping the website current and relevant, just a host of things. And we're in the Easement Initiative, we put on the work plan for this year based on our business plan. So, but there's metrics out there, just so like the performance metrics report that you're used to seeing in the annual report, NV5 pulled together some annual metrics for outreach related to all these efforts, getting the word out about the sanitary system to our ratepayers. And so I invited them to give you an overview of those metrics. And we put a copy of the presentation in the packet just to get you thinking maybe about what we're tracking and if you have any questions of our outreach team. And with that, I'll hand it over to Gabriella. Thanks for joining us.
Perfect timing. Thank you, Steve. And we'll make it quick. We can see that the meeting is running late. It's so wonderful to see everybody, to see all your faces. Again, my name is Gabriella Dow with NV5. I think I recognize everybody here. And of course, Lawrence McGuire is also joining me from NV5, and you all work with him on day-to-day deliverables. Again, what we're focused on today is providing a summary of community outreach metrics, specifically digital metrics. And what we're going to quickly cover over the next 10 minutes is a little bit of background on what that means, diving into the specific RVSD metrics, how we track that, what the impact is, potential opportunities, and then of course we're available as long as you want for questions. Essentially, digital metrics are values that are commonly used to measure and track the performance of digital campaigns. Again, you use metrics for all sorts of different aspects, but this is digital public outreach. And these quantifiable values help to set expectations and to see if the efforts that we're undertaking are having a positive and desired impact. So it often takes years to develop and implement a successful communications and public outreach program. And we measure success by maintaining confidence, trust, and satisfaction by our customers and the community at large. And below are some of the steps that go into this years-long process. We actually started with Ross Valley Sanitary District in 2017. And at that time, we did conduct a survey to do some research and find out where the community was at. We took that information to create a strategic communications plan. We have updated that over the years, but we do have core key messages that are aligned with your mission, and that's how we create the informational materials. The website was one of the main informational materials to have a whole new website, but we have fact sheets. We've had everything from community workshops and specific material for CIP projects. As we publish and share that information, we gather all sorts of metrics, and that's what we're going to be diving into today. And we do have opportunities to review, update, and adjust the entire program based on those metrics over time. Now, where do we get all of this information? I'm certainly taking notes during this board meeting for that great metric of 100,000 gallons of recycled wastewater. The general manager bulletin, of course, is driven by Steve, and he obtains input from staff. There's community suggestions. Lawrence is out on the field sometimes for the CIP programs. We're always listening to the community. We check social media to see when RVSD is mentioned. So there are a lot of inputs to gather information. Now, where we present Ross Valley Sanitary's info and what we're tracking are the following items, and this is what Lawrence is going to provide metrics on: your website, your general manager bulletin, or what we call the e-newsletter, your digital ads, and social media. So Lawrence, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Okay, thanks, Gabriella. To give you a quick overview of each of these items, because we realize there's a lot of information included in a couple of these charts, I'm going to quickly go over the high points, and then I invite you to review your copy a bit closer and look at numbers, and if you have questions, certainly ask. Overall,
thank you, Lawrence. Oh, thank you, Lawrence. Very good. I just want to remind the board that if you can't see those numbers on this table, you can drag your mouse over to the right and you can zoom. Use the plus key in case that it's too small for you to see as he has it set up. Okay, thank you, Lawrence.
Sure. So the key thing we look at with metrics are things like the number of visits, the duration of the visit, what pages people are going to, those types of metrics. This first slide shows the overall year metrics for Ross Valley's website. The good news is when you look at most of these numbers, they remain consistent and they remain consistently fairly high for the population base that you have and the people that are looking at it. So these are good numbers. Next slide. Breaking it down further, there were over 32,000 visits to the website last year. The average duration that a customer or a viewer was on the site, whether it was 1 page or 3 pages, was about 2 minutes and 21 seconds. Of all those visits, about 63% of them left the website after visiting 1 page. So they may have gone to a Laterals page or the newsletter page, and that was as far as they went. Overall, there were over 38,000 page views, and of those, 31,000 were single page. Another interesting metric to look at are site search keywords. And on the website, if you look at the graph to the right, you can see jobs by far was somehow included in the site search keywords. So the most search by keyword had to do with jobs and work, and then it was followed by the other categories and the numbers of searches to the right of each of those categories. Next slide. Continuing with the overview, it's interesting to also look at things like exit pages. And these pages that you see below with the lateral permits and so forth, these are pages that people ended up on the website, and it may have been their single view or it may have been one of the subsequent pages they looked at. And as you can see, a lot of people are very interested in laterals and permits, and then they're interested also in job opportunities and the other categories. Looking at devices, over to the right, the vast majority of viewers are looking at the website either on a desktop or their laptop. Then that number drops to what, about a quarter of that first number. They're looking at it on phones, and then you can see the other numbers drop quite a bit, with tablets being below other unknown devices that they don't list. Next slide. Then Gabriella mentioned the e-newsletter, and that's the monthly GM bulletin. And we send that out to the selected mailing lists every month via the Constant Contact platform. And that's a great platform because it not only allows us to set up the bulletin within the platform, it gives us all of these great metrics. And what I want to point out on this report here is the number sent 250 on average. That is about the number of bulletins that go out every month. It varies by maybe 5 to 10, depending on people opting out or joining. 2 other metrics that are really interesting and good to point out is the open rate. Now, what that means is that when people receive the email with the GM bulletin, they're actually opening the email. And at 37% of people looking at that email, that surpasses a 25% industry average. The same thing with the click rate. And what that means is if somebody looked at the GM bulletin in their email, then they actually clicked one of the links to a website page or for additional information that was embedded in the website. So roughly you can say that that's a pretty good indicator that that number of people, about 13% of the people, are then referring to your website after just looking at the GM bulletin, and the industry average on that's about 10%. Consistently throughout last year, you've remained above average in both of those metrics. Now, if you look at this next slide, the main key thing I want to point out here is that you're exceeding industry standards. And what you can do is you compare the business types, and then if you look at the numbers of their open rate and so forth, and then the clicks and the clicks and the open rates, you'll see that the percentages at Ross Valley are high and are above average compared to some of these other industries. Next slide. We also do digital ads, and we have 4 ads that run in rotation on the Marin IJ. And the digital ads are interesting because within the digital ad, you will have a link embedded. So for example, if it's the environmental ads that talk about environmental practices and for more information, there's a clickable link on that ad if someone's looking at it digitally, and it will direct them to the sustainability page on the website. And that is another driver of people to the website, are these digital ads. And the main takeaway that I would like to share on these is monthly, both the click rate trends and the opens have been very high and holding steady. So the digital ads are making an impact monthly, and they're good numbers. Next slide. Then there's social media. And in the last year, we've gotten more proactive in the sense that we're using Nextdoor. Ross Valley did not have other social media. You're not on Twitter, you're not on Facebook. So through Nextdoor, what's really great about this platform is if you look at the verified residents column over towards the right, through this one platform, we're potentially reaching at one time 28,000 or more people with these messaging. Then you'll also notice on the spreadsheet, I note how many posts per month and the views. And the one view that I really want to point out to you, which says a lot of people went to look at something after they saw the ads or the Nextdoor post, is that 10,000 number. And guess when that was? Guess when 10,000 people viewed? It was when we were talking about COVID. It was the messaging that we put out about COVID and what Ross Valley was doing. So a lot of people were paying attention and looked at that messaging, over 10,000 of them. That's great. Next slide. This is what the monthly reports we get from Nextdoor look like. They provide us the metrics, then we compile them. And again, if you look at those numbers, over 30,000 verified residents in 69 neighborhoods. And then we get the numbers of residents that join each month. And the other thing that I will mention is that Ross Valley, the district basically falls within those communities. So what I'm saying is anyone who's in the district that's on Nextdoor can see these messages because they're all within this area. The other comment I would make is you'll note replies down at the bottom of this. We've turned that function off because at this time it was determined the time that it would take to potentially be responding to every question, comment, and so forth. So we will get thanks from people, but we're not opening the replies at this time. It can very potentially turn into an open comment forum. Next slide. Then there's social media through YouTube. And on YouTube, Ross Valley has sustainability videos that are posted. And what we've done is we link those videos through the YouTube portal for people to view. And then we're able to track the metrics and the views of each video based on that. And the other thing I will mention about the videos, these have been broadcast on TV as well through an agreement with Comcast last year and so forth. So the videos are getting pretty wide reach as well. Next slide. Last thing I'll mention about social media is not only do agencies and organizations post their own information, a lot of times project partners, customers, people that are happy with them, people that have great things to say and so forth will also mention you or call you out in social media. So never underestimate the power of that. And those mentions can obviously be for the better or for the worse, but in these cases, they're positive that we're showing you examples of. And now I'm going to hand it back to Gabriella.
Excellent. To wrap up, we also use a tool called Meltwater, and we use that for releasing press releases. We can track and see which reporters or editors have opened it and then track all the media coverage. This is an example of what's possible through Meltwater. This is a dashboard. It's for a client of ours, Sandag, a regional agency that has every social media account you can imagine. And so they do have a lot of activity, and you can track sentiment. You can see on the right-hand side, it shows whether the mentions of the agency are neutral, positive, or negative, and this is an algorithm that's determining that. You can see a spike there, for example, in the month of February, there were specific days where there was a lot of discussion about Sandag. And I know it's difficult to read, but you can also see a little kind of word cloud that gets generated by the algorithm. And that tells you the main topics, what people are discussing. RVSD, again, doesn't have any social media accounts and doesn't get mentions to this point, but this is something that we have that's available to consider for the future. And again, we do use it for the press releases. So how do we use all this information? We have all of these metrics and they have allowed us to establish a baseline over time. Just like we saw interest increase on Nextdoor on that month and we figured out it was because of COVID. If we were to see a sudden decline or a lot of spam, reports on the monthly bulletin, which I can't imagine, but we look for all of that. Why are people unsubscribing, or why has something really dropped, or why has something really increased? And so we're able to get a better feel for how the community is receiving the information. We can set new goals. We can, decide that we want more people to click on or view specific information, and then we'll strategize on how best to do that. We would implement the change. And of course, again, we would review the metrics and continue to update and adjust our approaches until we reach the desired results. And so we'll take some questions. And again, I just want to say what an honor it is to work with all of you and with the wonderful RVSD community. Thank you.
Michael?
Terrific presentation, Gabriella and Lawrence. Question, I was a little bit surprised. Earlier in the meeting, we talked about we had 15,000 customers, and I see that we're only sending out 250 general managers bulletin. Did I read that correctly?
Yeah, so we have 250, and again, we inherited the constant contact system when we came on board in 2017. And so there were addresses loaded in there. We actually, when we had the community workshop, added about 50 more. There are more addresses in the system because there were also reporters and media outlets that were added in there. And there are other address books, I guess you will say, that were people that were receiving information about the Lateral program, but they had not opted into the newsletter. And so over time, few people have been added on. The news, the bulletin is available on the website, and I think people click on there. But you're right, it's 250 people that are on the distribution list, and we haven't really done anything to really push more people signing up. We have some agencies that on the bottom of all their email signatures, they'll say, have you signed up for our monthly bulletin? Click here to register. So, I mean, there are different ways that you can get more people to sign up. We tend to see that you'll have the township managers, some employees of RVSD also sign up for the bulletin. They really tend to be your dated, people who really do business and are interested in the latest updates.
Can I add a quick comment? Michael, I can clarify and let you know that the people that get the monthly bulletin from those lists are the local agency heads, from the town and all of that. Then it's the local officials, elected officials, and then it's the people that have opted into the GM bulletin, said specifically they want it, and then the final are all RVSD employees get it as well.
So listen, I am such a giant fan of Steve's. Every month I look forward to the general manager's bulletin, and I was actually quite surprised at the 250 number, and I just spent a few seconds here trying to drill down, and I got to where it says GM bulletin, and it says click here to be added. I think it is just my opinion, is that on the very front page, if somebody goes to rvsd.org, opt in to our monthly GM bulletin right on that front page. And maybe we, I think what we're doing, it's just me, I'm the elected official, but I think it's really fascinating and would love for more people to be reading it. And I mean, it's there and I got to it, but I had to do several clicks down to get it. And, maybe as an experiment, try just putting a sign on the front page where it would look nice to do that. For more information about what we're doing, opt into our email account, General Manager's Bulletin, because they are so well written. I'm not sucking up. I'm just saying.
If I can
Go ahead,
add to that, two things. One, there's only 94 people who've read them, so 250 sent out, 94 being read. So I'd like to see that number increase. Now, the average, all those great records will probably go down, but that's okay. I'm not worried about that. I agree, Michael's idea is good, but I would want to point out, if we're changing the front page, I like his idea, but I also always wanted a one-click on the front page to the agendas. Right, immediately right there for current and future agenda items, and even backward agendas, click here. Because you got to click through a couple to get to, and we changed that at CMSA, and I think it's better. If I can make a separate point, the message that I'd like to see us start sending out immediately is all about Larkspur Landing.
Okay. Yep.
I do take that back. I see that there's 4 little things that go across the bottom, and one of them is the January General Manager's Monthly Bulletin. Let me just look at the bottom of that and see if there's a place. Anyway, maybe you could just say opt in.
Well, another thing that we've seen with similar agencies is there are so many new elected officials and people come and go from different agencies. And again, reaching out to some of these regional partners and just letting them know, would you like to receive these updates, and giving them a sample of one. It's chock full of information. That's really where we see a lot of signups for such detailed information like this, or letting them know, if you're ever wondering what's happening, here's the page to click. It's straight from the general manager. So that could be something. And then if you are going to be putting out a lot of information about Larkspur Landing, letting people know, sign up for the monthly bulletin. That's going to be the first place where you're going to get updates. The information is provided on the website, but it's just explained with a little bit more detail on the bulletin. So we can definitely put some effort behind that. We'll work with Steve, and any direction he provides. Those would just be some initial ideas.
Yeah, maybe we could just sort of put it all over the place. It wouldn't take much, like I can't imagine on the January 1 here, we're talking about Butterfield and Shady Lane. Why wouldn't everybody on Butterfield be signed up to take a look at this? It would just take, anyway, just my opinion. I think these people who all come complain later, the information's all here. Anyway, just an opinion. 250, I said, oh, that's sad.
Any other comments or questions for the NV5 team? Thank you.
I'm just going to say that they do a fantastic job. I'm very pleased. I love the videos. I definitely see the videos on YouTube all the time. The first time it really struck me, I was like, wait a minute, how's that popping up? So I love it. I think it's great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Our public outreach presence is just night and day compared to when I first joined the board. So that's
and I'm struck by the things that they're measuring, and then to Doug's point that we're going to do some kind of a press release on Larkspur Landing, and now we're going to be able to track the metrics that go with that effort. So, and if that happens to be April of this year, it won't be COVID this time. It will be Larkspur Landing, but we'll see. Hopefully not COVID. No, thanks very much to the MV5 team. Very responsive to our needs. We're doing kind of a novel effort too with the easements. So we'll be looking for metrics with the Easement Initiative. I may have mentioned this, but I've sent our staff out to trainings with the different trade organizations. There's a CWA, and David Patzer, who does the risk work for CSRMA. He had a training on easements. I had staff go out to these, and the word back was, oh yeah, these aren't even close to what we deal with in our easements. All the training statewide is focused on like a back alley behind a store, not somebody's, steep slope backyard. And the one I showed you, right? The Indiana Jones, there's nothing like that.
The fence over the manhole.
Right, and so we're the fence over them. These are issues that I think, there are other districts that deal with them, but I don't know if they've tackled this. And I think we're going to learn some things, because, we're going to have to answer questions. And I think, having this system in place to track metrics and, and try to see how effective our outreach is for this initiative, that will be interesting to see in the coming months.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you for staying through our whole meeting.
Oh, again, it's so great to see all your faces and hear your voices. Thank you so much.
Good to see you.
All right. If there's nothing else, I think we are adjourned. Thank you.
We'll see you in March.
See you in March. Good night.
Thank you.